Hello and welcome to another edition of Terrible Business Advice. I'm Neil Stoneham and today I'm joined by Dr. Rochelle Haynes. Now she's a HR and work transformation specialist based in the UK. She's the founder of Crowd Potential Consulting and a senior lecturer at Nottingham Trent University. Rochelle's also published a book with Jeremy Blain, who was the guest in our first episode, called Open HR, the Human Capital Framework for the Blended Workforce. Now, do you say yes to everything? We're often hearing this advice, aren't we, about just say yes to every opportunity that comes your way. But is that a good idea? Could it get you into trouble? Well, we're about to discuss that, so enjoy. Okay, Rochelle, thanks very much for joining us on the podcast. Welcome.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Neil.
That's great. Well, I know one big part of your job is to actually give lots of advice to your students and the people that you work with. So you're going to talk to us today about one piece of terrible advice. So what is it?
Yeah, I think that would be to say yes to everything.
Wow.
That was kind of a business philosophy I used when I first started my business, in that I wanted to say yes to opportunity and just be really bold and not be afraid to take up kind of just explore new ideas and explore new way of doing things. And it worked for me earlier in my career and my business journey. But I find as my business journey grew and as it evolved, it actually was a terrible thing to stick to.
Wow. Okay. So you're going to share with us today some experiences of that happening. But it's
Yeah.
interesting. A lot of people do say this, give this advice, including
Hmm.
Richard Branson. I mean,
Yeah.
he's one of the sort of big proponents of this. And he said, if someone offers you an amazing opportunity, but you're not sure you can do it, say yes, then learn how to do it later.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know. In one way, you could say this is good advice because it gets you ahead. And sometimes we have to come out of our comfort zone and we have to, sometimes say
Yeah.
yes to things that, we're not sure we can do right away, but, we can learn how to do things and deliver it or find people who will help us. And that's possible. So I think in that context, that's fine. But some people interpret that as, I'll just say yes. And it doesn't matter even if I don't think I can do it. I'll find out somehow and I'll wing it
Yeah.
and it all goes wrong, doesn't it? So tell us
Yeah.
about your experiences. You said early on that it worked for you, but
Yeah.
when did it all start to go wrong and what happened?
For me, so I would say I agree fully with Richard Branson, and that's actually my motto as well. Still, for me, the difference is not capability. The difference is alignment. So, when in terms of what Richard Branson is saying, I definitely agree. If there's a big opportunity for you that you know that will help your business, you're not sure how to do it. Yes, I'm the type to, okay, get my feet wet and then learn and grow along the way. For me, the issue came with when I was saying yes to opportunities that didn't align with my purpose or what I wanted to focus on in business. So what was happening was I'm an HR expert, I'd like to say an HR professional, and my focus is international HR. I look at remote work, I look at work transformation, leadership transformation, hybrid work, those type of things. Um, I found what happened because people knew that I was an HR, or they knew me for HR, they knew me as an HR professional. They thought that I did all things HR. They thought I was a generalist, and I would think. So what would happen is I would take any HR consulting job. And what that resulted in is taking time away from my original focus, taking time away from my business. And it led to me being a lot more operational than strategic. So what ended up happening was, one, I wasted a lot of time. Sometimes I acquire the wrong type of client, because I think that's the other thing too. Sometimes I would say yes to every client because I was a young business. But I think I realized that there are some clients that are better to work with than others. And I think sometimes it's best to have an idea of who is your ideal client rather than just say yes to everybody that comes. So I've had that before and I've seen it a lot. You see it a lot, for example, with pricing. Let's say as a consultant, you have your particular price. And yes, you may have variation of your price according to different markets and depending sometimes on the client. But other times you have a client that might come in and they want you to offer your services at 50% of the cost. Still the same amount of work, but maybe 50% of the cost. And you're like, oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't maybe I should do this because it's still money coming in. I should be grateful that some work coming in. They want to work with me. But what I found is that the client that typically comes in and wants me to bargain down on my price is the client that I usually end up having to put double the effort and double the work in. So sometimes what happens is the client wants to pay less and they want more. Whereas I find where I focus on clients who are, they recognize the value you offer as a business, they're willing to pay the price that you've offered, then that's the client that often displays more commitment to the project. That's the client that shows up on time. That's the client that hands everything on time, that communicates properly, and that is in alignment, and that we tend to work very well together. So I find over the years, that kind of say yes to everything philosophy sometimes has taken me away from my original purpose and my original focus and caused me to sometimes grab at everything, where I don't think that's the right approach, especially as your business grows. Maybe as a young business, yes, you want to say yes to as many opportunities as possible. But as you grow and as your ability, your capacity, let's say your capacity, I would say, becomes a bit more limited because you have so many things on your plate. Yes, you're growing, you have a bigger team and whatnot, but your capacity to do several things, you have to be very, let's say, selective. Then I think it's important to know now when to say no. So I've gone from saying say yes to everything to no is a full sentence. Learn when to say no as well.
Yeah, I think so. I absolutely recognize this as well from when I started out. I was exactly the same. Because I think when you're starting out your business, you're so excited to land a client, aren't you, to have a win that,
Yeah.
you'll just say, you think, well, you'll just say yes because you think, well, it's a client and I'm going to get some money. And there's a philosophy behind that. And I think it could be a good thing to an extent. But you did mention there that sometimes you'll take on a client because you're desperate to have that win. And yet that client ends up being more work for you in the long run and causes you more problems. And actually,
Mhm.
if you just been a little bit more selective and not said yes to every single opportunity that comes your way, because
Yeah.
there were dangers like this, you would have actually had a bit more bandwidth to deal with better clients. So
Yeah.
sometimes, even though you desperately want to say yes to something, sometimes, if you feel that that client is potentially going to cause you a lot of work, particularly if they're start trying to get you down 50%, that's always a red flag for me. If
Yeah.
they're really, I don't mind, people asking for a discount because that's business, right? But if it's
Yeah.
a huge amount of money or if a significant one discount on what
Mhm.
I'm offering, then yes, it's red flag. So yeah, I've learned now to say no sometimes and, do it
Yeah.
in a very polite and professional way.
Mhm.
But that does make a difference in terms of your ability to deal with the workload coming in. And of course, the more you get established, the more people that start coming to you rather than you having to go to them.
Yeah.
Then that's when you really need to apply this advice of don't say
Yeah.
yes to everything. Be selective, and that's good for you in the long run, isn't it? And also your business will be better, I think.
Yeah, yeah, it helps to keep your focus because it's easy to get distracted in business, especially as you grow. You want to do everything. If you have a particular expertise, whether that's marketing or HR, sometimes you think you want to do everything. You have the ability because it's marketing to cover all of these areas, but it doesn't mean that you should cover all the areas. And
Yeah.
I think a great piece of advice that I was given once is it's better to be brilliant at one or two things, than be mediocre at 10 to 15 different things. So
Mm.
sometimes I think it's really important to be very selective and to think very strategically about where you dedicate your time and your effort towards.
Yeah, I wish I'd followed that advice a bit earlier, actually,
Mhm.
because it's great, isn't it? It's focusing on one or two things and being really good at it rather than trying to
Mm.
do 10, 15 different things. And that's what I did early on. And now I've sort of found my niche and I've found what I particularly am
Yeah.
good at. But we're always learning. I'm always, changing things. I'm sure you are too as you go through your business. That's what, good business
Yeah.
people do.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. I mean, it can lead to burnout as well if you're not careful. And of course, if you overwhelm
Absolutely.
yourself because you've said yes too much, then
Yeah.
you're going to end up burnt out, and then you're not going to be able to deliver anything, or you're going to underdeliver. So that's a problem. The other thing is that I think there's missed opportunities as well. Sometimes You know, you'll
Mm.
be saying yes to one thing and you'll be delivering for that, and then eventually you are overloaded, and then a really good opportunity comes along,
Yeah.
and you have to
And
turn
you
it
don't
down
have the
because you don't have the
space.
time. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's another thing. And then just going back to this idea, I think you mentioned about capability. So
Mm.
Richard Branson, of course, is talking about you know, if you're not quite sure that you can deliver it, then still go
Mm.
ahead and say yes. And I think
Yeah.
that's, you know, it's great for that sort of entrepreneurial spirit. So nobody's saying he's
Yeah.
wrong. But my concern, and I've heard lots of stories about
Hmm.
this, is that people
Hmm.
say, yes, I'll do it, but they don't have the capability, they don't have the
Yeah.
resources, and
Yeah.
then what they deliver is a disaster.
Yeah.
And then, of course, that
Yeah.
can cause problems, can't it? So I think you've got to
Yeah.
take that advice in that spirit. I was talking to another
Yeah.
guest. Sorry, you're going to say,
No, I was saying, yeah, and I think there sometimes is a matter too of integrity and very much the integrity of the individual. I wouldn't advise anybody, or I would say not advise, because you shouldn't. If it is that, for example, I'm an HR professional and someone's come to me with this brilliant, I don't know, 500,000 project for marketing. I think it would be rather disingenuous of me to say, okay, I'm gonna accept this job and then go on YouTube and watch a marketing video. So
yeah,
I think I absolutely agree in that sense. So I think it definitely has to be um, balanced and definitely has to be tempered by the integrity of the individual. I really hope that most businesses would have that as a sort of frontline value. So I absolutely agree because I do think if you get to that point where you're saying yes to a job where you know you do not have the capability in any way to do it, but you're saying yes, I think that's a matter of integrity. Whereas let's say if you're growing in your business, you've studied this, you have the ability, you've done it before, but perhaps not in this setting. Um, you have maybe some resources and you're currently building that, then yeah, you have the opportunity perhaps to say yes, but perhaps you also want to think of how do you mitigate any risk and also how do you get the support you need to fulfill that as well.
yeah, yeah. So as long as you have that in place, then yes, it's probably okay to say yes and take a chance.
Yeah.
But just to sort of plug another episode of the podcast, I talked
Yeah.
recently to an entrepreneur called Kamal Hassan, who runs
Mm.
an animation company in Palo Alto,
Yeah.
which is Silicon Valley in America,
Mm.
in California.
Yeah.
And he was telling us the story of how he started, and he, you know, sold himself as this really experienced, animation company expert. And you know, he didn't necessarily have the resources to deliver for these big companies that were he was pitching to, and
Mm.
he ended up having to use cheap labor, and the quality
Mm.
of what he produced wasn't great. So
Yeah,
he had that experience. If you want to hear more about that, you should check out that episode on "Fake It Till You
definitely.
Make It." So that's for
Yeah,
our
there's a
listeners
real
there. If you
danger of that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
It
a
can
really
be
good
good in some
learning.
ways. Yeah, it can be good. I guess it's balanced with everything. Because in that case, yeah, I've heard of, and it sounds like a good episode. I'm gonna go look for that.
Yeah,
Because I have heard people say that before, like fake it till you make it. And I know most business entrepreneurs have this experience that they go through with imposter syndrome as well. So I feel like a lot of business entrepreneurs feel like they are faking it till they make it, till
yeah,
they get their ideal.
yeah.
And then there are actually people that are faking it until they make it. So I totally agree that there's quite a balance there where you have to decide at what point are you being dishonest versus at what point are you taking a chance on yourself.
Yeah. So people should listen to that episode to get some balance from this because they're very connected, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Say yes to everything
Yeah.
and also
Yeah.
faking it because in some cases, if you say yes to something you
Yeah.
can't do right away, you're gonna have to fake it to a point. But we do talk about that in the episode about this idea that in some cases that's kind of acceptable, but you know,
Some cases,
well,
yeah, that's
yeah,
the taking the chance. Some cases, yeah.
yeah,
I was just saying that was the yeah, that's the taking a chance on yourself, and that's I think that's perfectly fine for people to do. I encourage it, but definitely you do have to know within yourself the difference between when you're taking a chance versus when you're in over your head.
yeah. And I think that's just a question of being wise, isn't it? And knowing your
Absolutely,
limits. But again, you
yeah.
know, one thing I don't want to do in this podcast and the series and the concept of it is to try and dampen down the entrepreneurial spirit because we all know
No,
that you know sometimes it's
yeah.
good to take risks, but
You have
some
to.
people
You
yeah,
have
but
to.
people do it just blindly, don't they? And they don't really think it through. So this is kind of the
Yeah.
warning that we're trying to get out there. But yeah, I think it's really good.
Yeah. And a
So
lot
so
of
we've
entrepreneurship, oh sorry, a lot of entrepreneurship as well is trial and error, you know? Sometimes you do get it wrong. So sometimes you take a chance on something and you do think, yes, I have the ability to do it, and you genuinely believe that. And then sometimes it turns out maybe the thing doesn't go too right, or you didn't have the capacity, whatever the case might be. And that's okay. So I think whereas it's from that point of view, then I would definitely encourage entrepreneurs to really, as you said, it's wisdom and it's discernment that comes along the way, and you grow that and you develop it as you continue to pursue business. But another thing I would say as well that really helps in kind of making those decisions is listening to your gut. I've found so many times in business that there are times where I didn't listen to my gut. And it always came back. All this situation always turned on me. I absolutely encourage entrepreneurs to take a chance on themselves. But when you want to, I think as you grow as an entrepreneur, whether you make that decision to take a chance on yourself and when you want to know whether that's the right thing or not, I think one of the things that you learn to do as an entrepreneur is to listen to your gut. And listening to
mm,
your gut helps you to make that decision as to whether or not it's wise to take on this thing that seems way beyond me, or whether or not I am in over my head. So I think listening to your gut, I've found in business before that there are times where I didn't listen to my gut. So maybe a project was in front of me and I sincerely thought I could achieve this. I sincerely thought with the limited capacity I had at the time that it was for me and whatnot. But I had a gut feeling that I kind of ignored because, you know, that gut feeling is very hard to explain. And researchers have tried to study it for years, you know, and still we know that it's a gut feeling. We know that it influences our decision, and it picks up on danger, you know. But still sometimes we ignore it. And what I've found now as I've grown as an entrepreneur, listening to my gut helps me to make that choice of what to say yes to and what to say no to. Because sometimes I think people, yes, we spoke about times where people perhaps are being completely dishonest when where maybe they're taking on a project where they know they don't have the resources, but perhaps they want the money that it offers. But in other cases, people genuinely believe that they can deliver on this big thing. And in some cases they can, but in other cases, I would really advise them to listen to your gut, listen to what your gut is saying, listen to your what you are feeling in those moments, and don't ignore that feeling, because that gut feeling is I found that to be a solid guide a lot of the times in letting me know in business what is a right thing to pursue, and what I might be misaligned with.
yeah, I think that's really good advice, actually. And I totally identify with that as well. Because I think there are times when, you again, you're desperate to take on something because you're thinking money, you're thinking opportunity, but
Mm.
something deep inside somehow, and it's very difficult to explain, isn't it? But it's saying, hang
Yeah.
on a minute, just be careful about this. Where I can see something not quite aligning with this, and therefore you need to
Mhm.
at least examine that and not just ignore it.
Yeah.
Because we become blinded sometimes, don't we? It's a bit like love, isn't it? You really love
Yeah.
someone, or you really fancy someone, but there's something in your heart, that's not quite right, and then
Yeah.
that's when disaster happens. So yeah, to
Yeah.
trust your gut, I think is brilliant. So yeah,
Yeah.
what the part of this podcast is to kind of to turn the essence of this advice
Mhm.
into something good. So there is, I think, that we talked about Richard Branson and his position, and where
Mhm.
this actually is good advice in certain contexts. So let's just quickly go through
Mm.
some of these as well. We probably covered some of them, but
Okay.
saying yes strategically, I think, is the big one, isn't it? So
Absolutely.
you talked about
Mm.
that, didn't you? Prioritize quality over quantity. And as you sort of get
Yep.
further in your business, I mean, would you identify with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's going back to that idea again, of when I first started, where I wanted to take anything related to HR. And also with that, sometimes it led me to partnerships that I should probably have never been in the first place. So I think sometimes where we try to go too general and serve too many audiences, what happens again is we end up serving all of those audiences at a very mediocre level, or not, we end up not serving some. Whereas where you focus in on where your niche is, that is where you're really able to deliver. And it goes back to this idea of finding your tribe. We've heard of I think it's Seth Godin, if I have it right. Correct me if I'm wrong. But there's this idea of finding your tribe and finding the people that align with what you do, rather than trying to draw everybody in, rather than trying to get everybody to focus on what you're doing. Because what happens sometimes is where you try to reach a very wide audience in what you do, a lot of those persons in that very broad audience, they don't convert to leads, they don't do business with you. Maybe some might cheer you on. So you may have, perhaps if you're on social media, you may have the likes, you may have the perhaps the comments along the way. But often if it is that you're looking for business and clients, often those things might not convert into that. And that's not always saying that's the main purpose while you're doing it. Perhaps you are mission focused. So you know your why and you know your purpose of what you're doing. And many people will come on board and they'll cheer you on, but only a handful of those people might be the people that you actually do business with. So you'll end up going from a very wide audience to a very small audience that you serve very well and that they will compensate you to suit.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I totally agree that having been on the business journey myself, it's absolutely the best advice. So
Mm.
we won't be covering that in terrible business advice because it's really good.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it aligns very much to what we're talking about, doesn't it? In terms of when you
Yeah.
say yes, to sort of consider this as your long-term goal really is to have that
Yeah.
niche, is to have that not to focus on too many things, but to be
Yeah.
good at one or two things, and that's really going to propel you. I
Absolutely.
think initially people don't like to sort of think along those lines, do they? Because they think
Mm.
it's going to take me a long time to make money. But actually,
Yeah.
what I've learned is that, going for all those opportunities straight away slows things down. If
Mm.
you'd actually been a
Mhm.
bit more selective, you'd actually be a bit more niche, you would have made money quicker ultimately. So that's really
Yeah.
worth thinking about as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, and the other piece of advice I think is setting clear boundaries as well, isn't it? So know what you to say yes to
Absolutely.
and knowing when to say no. And if you've got a good idea of where that is, that's going to help. But leave room for the
Yeah.
unexpected. So nobody's saying you don't
Mm.
have to be very forensic about every decision that you make.
Hmm.
Sometimes, there may be something which excites you, and
Yeah.
maybe it's going to take a bit more work, and why not? Take
Yeah.
that as an opportunity as well.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think it becomes easier to know what to say yes to and what to say no to when you have a clear idea of what you're trying to achieve, when you have clear goals and boundaries and targets along the way. And as you said, yes, you leave some room where the unexpected might come along, and perhaps that also helps to evolve your vision. But if you're moving forward with just this idea of, I want clients or I want much business, I'm an HR professional and I want a lot of business, I can help people with HR. I think as you go along, you will probably find yourself on the verge of burnout because it becomes very hard to know what to say yes to and what to say no to. So you might end up finding yourself again saying yes to everything. But where you're very laser focused on what you're trying to achieve, then it becomes a lot easier to discern where your yeses should come and where your no's should probably come.
yeah, that's really good as well. Yeah. So finally, just reflect before responding as well. So some people want to jump in and
Yeah.
say yes straight away, especially if they're in a face-to-face
Mm.
situation.
Yeah.
But I think you've got to, sometimes if you're not entirely sure at that moment, it's okay to say, well, let me think about it. I'll get back to you.
Yeah,
And there's
absolutely.
nothing
And
wrong
some
in that,
people
is
are
it? Yeah.
afraid of that because they're afraid of losing
Mm,
the opportunity. But if it's really meant for you and if it's really right for you, then it will be there. And sometimes it's true. Sometimes some opportunities go by, but perhaps the next opportunity might have been the one that's better for you. Because I've had that before too, where perhaps I thought, okay, I'm not sure about this particular thing because of various things going on at the minute. Let me think about this. And while thinking about it, perhaps that client found somebody else. But at the
mm,
same time, it freed up capacity for me to pursue bigger opportunities and better opportunities along the way. And I think as consultants and as entrepreneurs, sometimes we have this fear that there's not enough for everyone. There's not enough to go around. I remember I had a colleague, a friend that used to say there's enough bread for everyone, you know? And as a consultant, I had that when I first got into it, I would always say when I first got into consulting, I used to think that, okay, it's going to be super competitive and I'm going to be swimming with a bunch of sharks and I got to make sure that I get what's for me and this other person doesn't, because if I don't take this now, someone else will get it. But then I found as I grew as a consultant, my motto now becomes collaboration over competition. And what I've found is perhaps, yes, maybe I missed out on this particular opportunity because I decided it's not a right fit for me. But because of the networks I've built, because of the collaborations I've built, and the time that I've spent pouring into those, then there are always more opportunities that come through that. Whether I am facilitating opportunities for other people or whether they are facilitating opportunities for me. So I think when you operate with the right mindset, then you get away from that fear, that scarcity mindset of, oh, well, there's not enough to go around. So I have to say yes to this. I have to make sure I get as much as I can. Because actually, no, if you're operating in the right spirit and with the right networks and the right people supporting you, then there will always be opportunities for you.
Yeah, I think mindset, along the lines you just talked about is absolutely key, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's what happened in there. You had that mindset of, knowing exactly where to say yes. And that
Mm.
really that resonated with the people you were talking to, probably. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just that
Yeah.
aura that we give off, isn't it? When
Yeah.
we're in that position. So yeah, I think
Mhm.
we've kind of pulled apart this this advice, and we've seen that, of course, it's not entirely bad advice, is it? I mean, there's some
No, it's
truth to
not.
it, but as long as you
Yeah.
kind of do this with with all those issues that we've talked about in mind, so making
The
sure
key
you
is
suddenly to
discernment.
exactly, I think that's a big word here, isn't it?
Yeah.
Discernment. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we crystallize
Absolutely.
it into one word. How clever are we? All
Yeah, yeah.
right.
I think discernment makes the difference because discernment determines what you say yes to and what you should say no to. So in that case, you can't be saying yes to everything because there are some things where your advancement will depend on you saying no. So I
Hmm.
think discernment is key.
Discern and trust your gut as well.
Trust your
Just
gut.
add that as
Absolutely.
well. Yeah. Brilliant.
Um,
Okay. So we like to finish the podcast by asking the guest about what piece of advice perhaps you've given in the past that you now regret based on your experience. So you've got something for us, I think.
um, I think it would be um so I had this sort of opinion when I was younger, and it was kind of passed on to me during school and so forth around being professional and knowing how to navigate the working environment. And I've found over years that I would say to people, and I remember I said it to my niece. My niece had her first job recently, and well, not her first, but her first job in the field that she's studying. And she said she really wasn't enjoying it. And she mentioned a lot of different behaviors to me that was happening. And I said to her, well, this is a part of adulthood, and you just have to know how to navigate that working environment. It is what it is, and you just have to learn to navigate it and get on with it. And I think as I have evolved in my career, and I also learning from her, but also reflecting back on my business and how I've carved my business, I was giving her advice that reflected the exact opposite of what I've actually done. Whereas I found there were some workplaces I didn't fit into. There was a work lifestyle and a work style I didn't fit into. And because of that, I created my own business. I came out of it, I created my own business. I created what worked well for me. And here I was saying to her, oh no, you just have to learn to navigate this, what was a toxic environment that she was describing,
Hmm.
and just kind of learn to get
I said,
along with
actually,
it.
no,
No,
if
if
you're
you're
not
not
saying
comfortable with
anything,
that,
don't upset these
I won't
people, don't
start
do
him.
anything.
When actually that's the opposite. I went back to her and I said, actually, no, is that if you're not comfortable with that, it's probably best you look for something that's more suited for you or create your own opportunity. And I think a lot of bad behavior in business has been allowed to thrive because of that advice, that bad advice, which I no longer give. Because we think about business environments where we complain about certain types of behaviors, but sometimes the advice we give is keep your head down and get on with it, which allows that behavior to thrive. Whereas if we either, I don't know if you have the capacity to change it, then so be it. Try to do that. But if you don't, perhaps create a healthier environment, create your own space or a new opportunity, and then others will also, who align with that, will also get on board. So I think that advice of keep your head down and just navigate the bad environment that you're in, I think that's probably the worst advice that I've given. And it really doesn't reflect what I've done in my own career. And since dispelling that and kind of going back to her and say, do what I think is better for you, I think she's now in a healthier environment where she enjoys her relationships with her colleagues and so forth. So I think really in business, we really have to think about how we might be proliferating toxic environments by just this, if you can't beat them, join them attitude. I don't think that's the way to go.
Yeah, I think nothing is ever solved, is it, by just saying get on with it,
Yeah,
or try and
exactly.
ignore it, or just move on. Because
Yeah.
unless you do address it, I mean, even psychologically inside your own mind,
Mm.
it's going to be
Mm.
difficult to move on. It's going to affect you. So yes,
Yeah, yeah,
that's
you're
why I
dealing.
think
Sorry, go ahead.
it's meant in a positive way, isn't it? It's somebody's just trying
Yeah.
to help you, but actually, when you think about it, has the opposite effect sometimes, isn't it? Like you just said.
Yeah, you end up putting a lot of trauma in yourself. You're internalizing a lot of trauma, and it leads to a lot of burnout in the workplace. It leads to a lot of disillusionment. And I think it's very unhealthy way to do. But the worst thing it leads to me is a kind of stamp of approval of that bad behavior. Where if we want to change the bad behavior, we have to challenge it.
Mm. I mean, that's a whole other podcast, isn't it? Toxic behavior in
Absolutely.
in businesses.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think we've had a really good discussion today on
Mm.
being careful about saying yes to everything, and also
Yeah.
your last bit of advice there about not just being able to move on without tackling the
Mhm.
issue at hand. So that's really good. So thanks very much for being on a podcast. I'm sure that our listeners
Yeah.
are going to take away so much from this. I know I certainly did. So
Mm.
thanks very much for your time, Rochelle.
Thanks for having me. It was great to be here.
Okay, so some fantastic advice there from Rochelle, not just on the idea of saying yes to every opportunity, but also on the limits of working in a toxic environment, what you can do about it, and how you should prioritize looking after yourself. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, you'll be pleased to know that there are plenty of other pieces of terrible business advice that we share on this first series of the podcast. We look at lots of different subjects, from the customer is always right to never reduce your prices. We also look at fake it till you make it, never show weakness, and always have a plan B. 3 other topics that we challenge really within these pieces of advice that are shared in the business community, but are not always what they're cracked up to be. I've really enjoyed having these conversations for the first series of Terrible Business Advice, but I'm afraid that's it for now. We are going to come back though with a second series, which is going to be happening in a few months' time. And if you don't want to miss that, make sure that you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and also give us a 5-star rating as well to help support future episodes. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.